Hello, Battle Cats players. My name is Chance and welcome to my guide. Today we have a very special episode in store for us, as this actually marks a fairly big milestone for the channel, or at the very least marks a beginning of a new chapter, so to speak. This episode is going to be about Bahamut Cat. And while I'm not completely sure that's how it's actually pronounced, that's how I'm going to be pronouncing it. The reason I'm sticking to that is simply that I was playing a Dungeons & Dragons game a long time ago, and that's what the DM called it. And any of you who have played Dungeons & Dragons know that what the DM says is law, so I'm just going to be sticking beside that. Anyways, the reason this is so significant is Bahamut Cat is really one of the last units that you are just given access to for at least the early to kind of start of the mid game. Which means from this point on, we're going to be covering a wider variety of cats, which is so exciting to me. To be honest, this series is going at a pretty impressive rate, and I'm just looking forward to seeing where it all goes. Anyways, rambling aside, Bahamut Cat is technically considered to be a special cat, although we'll talk about that in a little bit, and he is unlocked by completing Empire of Cats Chapter 3. And as always, it is my hope that by discussing Bahamut Cat's evolutions, pros and cons, strategies and use cases, you can make an informed decision on how to best use this unit and how far to invest into him, if at all. Let's start by first talking about Bahamut Cat's evolutions. Naturally, it starts out as Bahamut Cat, which has the description an ancient cat weapon that was rumored to have caused the first apocalypse, has unearthly offensive power and area attack. Then at level 10, it will evolve into Crazed Bahamut Cat, whose description reads, turns out the first apocalypse was actually caused by this one. You can see why. Has unearthly offensive power and area attack. It is worth noting that the range and area of effect for both Bahamut Cat and Crazed Bahamut Cat are identical. Despite how the explosion of his attack looks, it's actually the exact same in terms of the affected area. So just do bear that in mind. And then after reaching level 20 and completing Into the Future Chapter 3, he will unlock as Awakened Bahamut Cat, which description reads, they say the power to obliterate Earth is already his. Freed of the suit which shackled his power and speed is unmatched and area attack. Well, we will talk about this in a little bit here. The difference between Crazed Bahamut Cat and Awakened Bahamut Cat is night and day. They are essentially two separate units. Let's actually start the process of discovering the inner machinations behind Bahamut Cat by taking a look at his performance. To start out with, as far as class is concerned, the normal and evolved versions of Bahamut Cat are considered to be backliner and nuker in terms of their classification. A backliner being a unit with 400 to 499 range, and a nuker, which is considered to be a usually slow-ish attack rate unit that has extreme damage per hit, and often cases have a boosted ability against one or more traits, but that doesn't particularly apply to Bahamut Cat in particular. If you are unfamiliar with the normal and evolved form of Bahamut Cat, the way his attacks work is by essentially just creating a energy blast, for lack of a better term. That, of course, does a incredibly broken amount of damage. In his true form, however, he pivots essentially 180 degrees, becoming a rusher and a nuker. A rusher being an extremely fast unit, typically with shorter than average cooldowns, long backswing, high speed, and short to mid range, which is of course a lot different. They often have high damage and are able to do lots of damage quickly. And this very much embodies the idea of the awakened form of Bahamut Cat. Under pros, and once again, this just accentuates the duality of this particular unit, you have long range for the normal and evolved form, fast movement speed for the true form, many knockbacks for the true form, very high DPS for the true form, but high attack power for all of them. Under cons, you have long attack animation for the normal and evolved form, very slow attack rate for the normal and evolved form, low movement speed for the normal and evolved form, short range for the true form, long recharge time for the normal and evolved form, and mediocre health for all of them. Oh boy, where to begin with this? While we will discuss this far more in the next section, it is worth pointing out that not all of these cons are inherently bad. The low movement speed, for example, is actually pretty useful when partnered with the mediocre health. And that long attack animation is particularly egregious because it can lead to some attacks just missing entirely. And when coupled with the slow attack rate, it can be pretty painful. I have heard and read some interesting theories on how to avoid the whiffing that Bahamut can do, but I've been unable to consistently recreate a provable way to do it on my own term outside of just like brute force trial and error and luck. So if you are aware of any fairly guaranteed methods to make sure that Bahamut's big blast for his normal and evolved form always hits a group, let me know. Because almost every time I have used him, at least once I've seen him unleash his most devastating attack on like those guys. Like not even anything worth hitting. And sometimes he will just straight up miss, or sometimes the enemy he's aiming at will die and then his attack will go off right after and it'll be like so damn pointless. Also on the pros for the true, the fast movement speed isn't always necessarily a good thing either, bearing in mind that it is paired with still fairly mediocre health. Anyways, before I start completely rambling about this unit, let's check out some gameplay and go over really just how to use him and strategies involving Bahamut Cat. Honestly, where to even begin with this? There's so many ways to use this damn cat. So to start out with, the damage this cat deals is fundamentally insane, being really the highest base stat DPS unit in the game as far as memory serves. There are a handful of units that can get close and one or two that can even beat it with the use of cat talents and talent orbs. But in terms of raw, just straight up DPS, I'm fairly certain Bahamut Cat still takes the cake. That being said, there are a lot of cheesy strategies involving him that take advantage of this insanely high DPS. For example, using his Awakened stage in combination with Sniper Cat, or potentially even a cat tower, the basic cat tower, it is in theory possible to cause Bahamut Cat to clip through the enemies, and in doing so, just rushing the tower and taking it down. Although personally, I've never been able to do this. I've seen videos of it being done. I haven't been able to do it personally. And many of the people who did the videos had mentioned at some point that it took them quite a few attempts. So it's one of those things, as far as I'm aware, it isn't recreatable consistently, but who knows. Regardless, using Bahamut Cat as a tower rushing unit for the early mid game is super fun and has the potential to completely trivialize a few stages. Granted, there are some caveats to doing this, namely that a lot of times tower health is designed in a way where you can't really always one-shot it. By this what I mean is when a tower gets to a certain health increment, it can cause certain things to happen. For example, a boss spawning or something like that. And because of the way tower health is coded, you're not going to be able to blow past that in one solid chunk. So it'll essentially be you'll hit the tower really hard and then whatever is meant to happen at that health increment will happen and then you'll be able to do damage to it again. That being said, there is a way around this by using other rusher units like Green Shell or the Maglev Cat, where in which you hit the tower and then the frame that whatever needs to spawn or whatever needs to happen happens, another hit happens. Once again, this is one of those things I've seen videos on. I've never been able to consistently reproduce this, so I'm imagining either you need the most precise inputs or there's a little bit of RNG involved. Regardless, how you want to play these units is kind of the same if you're not trying to cheese. By that what I mean is you're going to spam your meat shields out, you're going to attempt to stall, And then after you get a decent enough stack, that's when you're going to call on Bahamut Cat, and he's going to come in and either nuke them all in the case of his normal or evolved form, or push them back as a result of his awakened form. Honestly, when it comes to this cat in particular, there are so many dang ways to use him because he is essentially two diametrically opposed units in one. However, it is worth noting that as you get later into the game and Ubers start to become a thing, he does fall off in a lot of his stats. While he is the king of overall DPS, at least in terms of base DPS, there are just some units that are far more useful than him. And unfortunately at this point, Bahamut Cat doesn't have access to any cat talents, which kind of makes sense, I suppose. I mean, with them he would be even more broken. And once again, I don't know, I feel like relying on this unit too much will result in the same effect as being Uber carried will, so perhaps it's for the best. If he were to get cat talents, I would prefer him not to get the attack buff. Instead, to perhaps get more things that make him a more all-around utility unit, or maybe even specialize him towards something like floating units. I think that would make thematic sense and perhaps give him some viability as well. But ultimately, I'm not too sure. Regardless, there are quite a few restrictive stages where having Bahamut on your team will really make the fight a lot easier for you. Just bear in mind, he will need a pretty decent amount of defense around him just because his overall health pool isn't really that great. And while in his awakened form, his cooldown time is fairly decent, it's fairly decent by Uber standards, and he's still far from what I would consider a spammable unit. As far as pricing is concerned, by the way, in Chapter 1 he'll cost you 3,000 cents, Chapter 2 4,500 cents, and Chapter 3 6,000 cents. Even with this analysis, there's probably a lot I'm still missing about use cases for this cat, so feel free to put them down beneath in the comments section. I really appreciate it. Up next, let's just quickly touch on his cat combo as he only has one of them. Heavenly Kings is a massive damage effect up of the small variety. It involves Immortal Yakimura, Awakened Bahamut Cat, Maniac Lion Cat, and it increases the effectiveness of the massive damage trait by 10%. If you're not familiar, units with the massive damage trait inflict 3 times damage to a specified enemy type, or 4 times damage if you have the relevant fruit treasures. Overall, it's not really that great. It's just a heavy cat commitment to a fairly niche effect, all things considered. And there are better cat combos that get a comparable result, so I don't know, it's not really that great. Now that we're done with the cat combo, I'm just going to flash a couple of the pertinent graphs and charts relating to Bahamut Cat and just read out some trivia while that's going on. Bahamut Cat is the first and only cat unit to have level 30 as its first reduction point. Bahamut Cat and his dragon-like appearance are a reference to the Final Fantasy series Bahamut, as well as the King of the Metallic Dragons in Dungeons & Dragons. Bahamut is closely associated with a powerful magic called Flare, which is usually one of the most powerful offensive magics available in D&D. His attack in the Battle Cats may be a sort of dark flare as well. Awakened Bahamut Cat has no idle animation in gameplay. It can only be seen when entering into the future Chapter 3 before unlocking him. Awakened Bahamut Cat originally only dealt 65,000 damage at level 30, which is increased to 93,500 in version 6.0, which gave him his multi-hit attack. Awakened Bahamut Cat has the highest base DPS of all cat units without talents. Before being given a buff in version 6.0, Awakened Bahamut Cat's DPS was second only to Greater Balrog Cat. When strengthened with his attack up talent, Greater Balrog still has a higher base DPS than Awakened Bahamut Cat. Awakened Bahamut Cat's DPS is higher than his HP. Talk about a glass cannon. Awakened Bahamut Cat's unmatched speed has always been exceeded by Capsule Cat and Sanda Yukimura, and later updates have only added more. And that's really all there is to say about Bahamut Cat, at least as far as I'm aware. If, as always, I missed anything, or if I misrepresented anything, or feel like there should be more clarification in some areas, feel free to comment the missing information down beneath. I sure appreciate that, and I know everyone else would as well. This is also the point where I am likely to be A/B testing a lot of different thumbnail styles, so let me know what you guys think of them as they come up. And as always, guys, thank you for watching to this point. Don't forget to like and subscribe for Cat God's blessing on your next gacha roll, And until next time, I'll talk to you later.